Dead Campus, a one-shot story. For every guy who ever stayed up until 3 a.m. on a Tuesday thinking, one more game. Just one more. Part 1. The video. The moment everything went sideways, I was in the middle of the most important team fight of the semester. It was a little after 3 in the morning. Harwick University's Caldwell Hall had been dark for 2 hours. All the sensible people were asleep, dreaming about midterms and meal plan balances and whatever normal people dream about. But in room 412, the monitors were still blazing, the mechanical keyboards were still clicking, and 4 guys who had absolutely no business being awake were absolutely awake. Dash, rotate left, left, your other left. I know which left is left, Zeph. Then use it. That was us. Me, Dashiell Craw, Jr., sports science major, widely regarded as the fastest set of legs on the 4th floor, and my 3 roommates. Beckett Rowe, who was our de facto shot caller and the closest thing our friend group had to an adult. Zeph Calloway, who was stress-eating flamin' hot Cheetos at a rate that should have been medically alarming. And Quillen Vesper, Quill, our resident tech genius, who wore glasses so thick they looked like they could stop a bullet, and who had once wired a motion sensor to the mini-fridge so he'd get an alert if anyone touched his Red Bulls. 4 gamers, 1 room, 0 plans to sleep before sunrise. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday night at an American state university. Then Beckett's phone lit up. He didn't look at it right away. None of us did. We were in the middle of a 5 versus 5 team fight that had been building for 40 minutes, the kind of standoff where every mouse click felt like defusing a bomb. The notification sat there in the corner of his second monitor, a video call from a contact listed as Orion, Senior CS, and glowed politely while we ignored it. The call went unanswered. A minute later, it rang again. Probably drunk dialing, Zeph said, without looking up. Orion doesn't drink, Beckett said. Then he's sober dialing, somehow worse. The second call cut off too. Then, after a beat of silence, a message notification appeared. Video sent. Hold the fight, Beckett said, and the command in his voice made even Zeph pause his chewing. Beckett pulled up the message. The video thumbnail was almost entirely black, just shapes in darkness. Nothing you could make out with any certainty. The kind of thing that, if a stranger sent it, you'd delete without a second thought, and maybe check your locks afterward. But Orion Falk wasn't a stranger. He was a 23-year-old grad student in the computer science department, 2 floors above us, in the kind of apartment that smelled permanently of instant ramen and ambition. He'd mentored half our hall through their first semester. He'd let us crash his couch last month when we needed somewhere quiet to study for finals. He coded 16 hours a day and played games for the other 8, and was one of the most methodical, deliberate people any of us had ever met. Orion Falk did not send mysterious black screen videos at 3 in the morning. Beckett hit play. The footage was shaky, the kind of shaky that happens when someone is filming in a panic, when their hands won't stop moving no matter how hard they try to hold still. The only light source was a television somewhere off camera, throwing blue-gray shadows across the room. The shot kept drifting, the angle unstable, and at first there was nothing to see except shapes. Then the shapes moved. One shape was hunched over another, low to the ground, and the sound coming through the phone's speaker was wrong. A wet, rhythmic sound. Heavy and slow and deeply, fundamentally wrong. Okay, what game is this? Zeph said. He'd set his Cheetos down. That's how I knew he was actually paying attention. Zeph Calloway did not voluntarily set down food. Graphics look insane, Quill murmured, leaning forward,
his thick glasses catching the monitor light. But I wasn't looking at the shapes. I was looking at the corner of the frame. There was a guitar there, an acoustic guitar with a cracked headstock, held together with electrical tape. leaning against a wall in the exact spot I'd seen it 100 times when we'd gone upstairs to hang out in Orion's apartment. The floor dropped out from under my stomach. "That's Orion's place," I said. The room went quiet. The game sounds from our computers suddenly seemed very far away. Beckett rewound it, paused, frame by frame. The guitar, the pattern on the couch cushion, the cybersecurity CTF pennant on the wall from last year's competition, Harwick Computer Society, 3rd place. All of it, unmistakably belonging to one person. In the last 3 seconds of the video, the camera tilted upward. Orion's face filled the screen, just for a moment. His eyes were wide and his face was the color of chalk, and his mouth was already moving in something that didn't make it to audio before the video cut to black. None of us said anything for a long time. "Not a prank," Quill finally said. It wasn't a question. "No," said Beckett. I grabbed my phone and texted Orion. "Hey man, you okay?" The message sat there, unread. I tried calling, straight to voicemail, his full cheerful voicemail greeting playing like a ghost of something from before tonight. I tried again. Same. "Check his game status," Beckett said. Quill pulled it up. Last online, 11 minutes ago. 11 minutes. Right when the video was sent. "Look at the school group chat." Zeph's voice was strange. The skepticism had drained out of it, and something else had moved in. He held up his phone. "He posted the video there too, but he deleted it. All that's left is this." He showed us the message. 4 words, no punctuation, posted to a group chat of 400 Harwick students, and then immediately deleted. "Stock up. Now." Zeph set his phone down on the desk. "So," he said.
Okay. Okay, I agreed, though neither of us meant it. Beckett was already at his computer, a different browser window open, scrolling fast. I pulled up my own laptop. The main social media feeds were normal. Finals memes, someone's birthday party photos, a thread about the dining hall running out of mozzarella sticks again. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that explained anything. Then Quill said, "Over here." He'd found a tech forum, a niche one, the kind where people went to complain about router firmware and trade conspiracy theories about planned obsolescence. Buried in the middle of a thread about local broadband issues were a handful of posts. "Does anyone know what happened to my cousin? He was at the North Campus and he disappeared last night." And, "Student went missing near Harwick North. University blocking info." And one more that simply read, "What is happening in the Cloverfield district right now? Someone, please." The posts were already grayed out. By the time Quill refreshed, they returned 404 errors. "Someone's scrubbing it," Quill said quietly. He pushed his glasses up his nose. "Active deletion. Specific keywords. This isn't an algorithm. This is a person, or a team of people, pulling targeted content." I looked at Beckett. He looked at me. "We should probably make some preparations," I said, with a calm I absolutely did not feel. "That's insane," Zeph said, and then, immediately, "How much cash do you guys have on you?" We sat on the floor in a circle, keyboards forgotten. Beckett had a legal pad out. He was the kind of person who kept legal pads, and he was writing in his clean, precise handwriting. A list. "Why us?" Zeph said. "If Orion was sending a warning, why only us? There are 400 people in that school chat." "Because we play survival games," I said. And as soon as I said it, I knew it was true. It sounded ridiculous in daylight. At 3 a.m., after watching that video, it was the most obvious thing in the world.
Orion knows us. He knows how we think. If something real was happening, something that sounds like something out of a game, we'd be the ones who'd actually take it seriously fast enough to matter. Quill nodded slowly. Classic triage logic. You don't warn the masses, you warn the specialists. I'm a sports science major, I said. You've logged 400 hours in The Last Stand, and you know the zombie classification system by heart, Quill said. You're a specialist. Beckett tapped the legal pad. Food, water, medication, tools, shelter, in that order. We need a secure location, somewhere on campus that's elevated, with limited access points, that nobody else would think to go. The observatory, I said immediately. Everyone looked at me. Top of Academic Hall, 3rd floor of the astronomy wing. The astronomy club president has the key, but he went home for the holiday weekend. The spare set is in the security office. Old Hendricks has that office, Beckett said. And old Hendricks falls asleep at his desk by 11 every night, Zeph said slowly, as if the words were coming out against his better judgment. Beckett stood up. He had that look, the one where a decision had been made and he was simply implementing it. The same look he got in games right before he called a perfectly timed rotation that none of the rest of us had seen coming. We split up. Zeph, you go with Dash to the campus store. Buy everything shelf-stable. Quill, keep monitoring. See what else you can find. I'll handle the key. And if this is nothing? Zeph asked. If we spend all our money on jerky and power bars, and tomorrow morning everything's fine? Beckett picked up his jacket. Then we have a lot of snacks and a funny story. A beat. And if it's not nothing? Beckett didn't answer. He didn't have to. Part 2. The Supply Run. The campus convenience store was called The Den. It was the kind of store that existed primarily to sell overpriced energy drinks and forgotten phone charges at 2 a.m., staffed by whoever had drawn the short straw on the work-study lottery. That night, the man behind the counter was Mr. Petrosian, not a work-study student, but the owner himself, a heavy-set man with a magnificent mustache, who was, as of our arrival, deeply asleep with his chin on his chest. I shook his shoulder. He startled awake, took in 2 college-aged guys in their pajamas, and managed to arrange his face into something resembling consciousness. Yeah? What do you want? Beef jerky, I said. All of it. And the protein bars, the peanut butter crackers, the trail mix. Anything with a shelf life over a year. He blinked at me slowly, the way you do when you're still partially asleep and someone is saying something that doesn't compute. It's 3 a.m. ROTC emergency exercise, I said. Last-minute call. Our instructor is basically sadistic. It was a bad excuse. Petrosian looked at us with the expression of a man who had heard many bad excuses and categorized this one firmly in the lower half of his collection. But he was also tired, and we had real money to spend. And after a moment he waved at the shelves. Scan everything yourself. I'll ring you up. We moved fast. I'd spent enough hours playing survival games to have my priorities memorized. Calorie-dense, low moisture, long shelf life. Chocolate with high cacao content. Vacuum-sealed jerky. Those survival biscuits that tasted like compressed cardboard, but packed enough calories for a full meal. Zeph grabbed salt, multiple bags of it, and I didn't argue, because salt wasn't just seasoning, it was preservative and antiseptic and trade currency in every survival scenario I'd ever played. 3 boxes of lighters, 5 flashlights, multiple battery packs. Zeph held up a family-size bag of pretzels. These? High sodium, no real calories per ounce.
Leave them. They're ranch-flavored.
Leave them. He put them back with the expression of a man making a sacrifice for the greater good. Then he grabbed 2 more bags of jerky, and I didn't stop him because jerky was jerky, and protein was going to matter more than almost anything else if this went the direction I was afraid it was going. I found myself working systematically, the way I'd learned to play. Left to right, top to bottom, check expiration dates, think 3 steps ahead. A lot of what was on the front shelves was garbage, things designed to look calorie-dense that were mostly air and sodium and marketing. The real stuff was at the back, at the bottom, the things that didn't move fast enough to justify prime shelf positioning. Compressed trail mix bars with a shelf life of 18 months, peanut butter in the big institutional tubs, a full case of glucose tablets from a diabetic supply section that most people never even knew existed, tucked behind the first aid display. For light and fire, 9-volt batteries, a hand crank lantern I found hanging on a display hook, waterproof matches in a sealed container. For medical, the dusty first aid kit, betadine, butterfly closures, elastic bandages. I pulled the fire axe off the wall without letting myself think about it too hard. The garden shovel felt better in my hands, more range, less committed to a single, terrible purpose. I was working my way through the bottom shelf, finding stock that had been there so long even Petrosian had forgotten it, but whose expiration dates were still a solid 18 months out, when the owner spoke up again. "Funny you're buying all this stuff," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Someone else came in last night, around midnight." I stopped moving. "Who?" "Don't know him. Accent from somewhere south. Bought every can of beans I had. I said, 'Planning a trip?' He said, 'Long one.'" Petrosian scratched his mustache.
Took all the canned tomatoes, too. Zeph and I exchanged a look. Somebody else had gotten a warning. We weren't the only ones. I found the first aid kit in the storeroom. Dusty, old, but stocked. 6-month expired cold medicine that would still work fine. Betadine, gauze, medical tape. In a corner near the emergency exit, there was a small fire axe in a glass case and a short-handled garden shovel, some kind of unrelated outdoor display, and I liberated the shovel without ceremony. "That'll be $347, Petrosian said when we wheeled the loaded cart to the register. I nearly choked. That was 2 months of my personal discretionary budget gone in a single transaction. I paid it because the alternative, being wrong about needing to pay it, was a problem I was willing to have. Zeph was quiet on the walk back, loaded down with bags. Around the corner from the dorms, he stopped. "Tell me we're overreacting," he said. I kept walking. "Nope." "Come on, give me something. The other dorm building's lights are still on. People are up. Someone's playing music down the street. If something was really happening." "The North Campus social media has been dark for 2 hours," I said. "It's 15 miles away. Information takes time to travel." "That's not reassuring." "No," I agreed. "It's not." We didn't talk much after that. Beckett had the observatory key by the time we got back. He'd found old Hendricks exactly where everyone expected him to be, face down on his desk, snoring with the conviction of a man at peace with the universe. The spare key had been hanging on a labeled hook in the unlocked office, like a gift from a god with a dark sense of humor. The 4 of us made 3 more runs before the sky started to lighten. The dining hall loading dock had a back door with an ancient lock that Beckett knew how to manipulate from the time he'd helped the custodial crew fix it after a pipe burst. Inside, 50-pound bags of rice that were too heavy and conspicuous to move, but also 10 bags of dehydrated vegetables, the stuff they used to bulk up the soups, with a 2-year shelf life. Cooking oil, soy sauce, vinegar. We poured the oil into empty plastic bottles. We took what we could carry. The 3rd-floor chemistry lab in Morrison's science hall had a window that didn't quite latch. Quill, being the smallest of us, went in through the window and passed out 3 bottles of 75% isopropyl alcohol. Medical grade, flammable, valuable. The campus health center was on the ground floor, and the overnight nurse had left her station for what looked like a bathroom break. Her timing was either very good or very bad, depending on your perspective. We cleaned out the supply cabinet, fever reducers, ibuprofen, gauze, betadine, bandages. More masks than I thought existed on campus, 5 big boxes of them, N95s and surgical, left over from the previous winter's respiratory illness season. From the athletics equipment room, foam sleeping mats, jump ropes, useful as actual rope, 2 barbells that would double as blunt weapons, a pair of cycling helmets and knee pads that I immediately claimed for myself. When you're the one who's going to be sent outside to run things, you wear the protection. We made it back to the observatory with 40 minutes to spare before the first hint of sunrise started graying out the eastern windows. The observatory room itself wasn't large. It held the telescope housing, some filing cabinets, a whiteboard covered in equations, and a small adjacent storage room that locked from both sides. We laid out the sleeping mats. We taped newspaper over the windows, leaving small slits for observation. We charged every device that could be charged. We filled every container we could find with water from the tap. At some point, in the middle of sorting batteries,
Quill said, "If this is real, what do we actually know about disease transmission from zombie fiction?"
"You're asking this genuinely," Zeph said. "I'm always genuine." "Fluid contact is the standard vector," Beckett said, from where he was organizing the food supply on the shelves. "Blood, saliva, in some scenarios aerosolized, but those are less common in the better-written sources." "Masks matter then. The alcohol is for decontamination." "And for Molotov cocktails," I said, "if we need them." Silence. "Molotov cocktails," Zeph repeated slowly. "We're talking about Molotov cocktails in our school, which I pay 30 grand a year to attend." "Dish soap makes the fire sticky," I said. "Mix it with the alcohol. Standard survival game recipe." Zeph looked at the ceiling. "I can't believe this is my life." "To be fair," Quill said mildly, "you did vote for playing one more game. We were in a team fight. And now we're in a different kind of team fight." We sat down on the sleeping mats in a circle. Outside, birds had started making noise. The pre-dawn murmur that usually meant your alarm was 20 minutes away and you should just get up. The campus below was still dark and still quiet. "If this is really the end of the world," Zeph said, not quite joking anymore, "what's your biggest regret?" Quill answered without hesitating. "Never fell in love." A beat. "For real?" "For real. Statistically improbable that I'd find someone compatible with my communication style. Apparently now it's also time improbable. So," he adjusted his glasses, "there's that." Beckett looked at the whiteboard. "There's a game I never finished. Control. I was on the last chapter." He paused. "I was saving it for after finals." "Dash?" Zeph asked. "I haven't been home since Thanksgiving," I said. It came out simpler than I'd meant it to. Just that. Nobody pushed for more. "My biggest regret," Zeph said finally, "is that I didn't finish my instant ramen last night."
I poured it, and then Beckett called the team fight, and I left it there. It's sitting in the hallway microwave. 3 sets of eyes turned toward him. "Getting cold," he added, "as we speak." I laughed. Then Quill laughed. Then Beckett made the small sound he made when something actually got him. The sound he tried to suppress because he had a reputation to maintain. And for about 30 seconds, in a room we turned into an apocalypse bunker, we laughed about abandoned instant ramen until our eyes watered. At 8 a.m., every light on campus went out. Not just the observatory, every building. The hum of HVAC systems that you never consciously notice until it stops, stopped. We heard students outside start complaining, the distant sound of voices doing the universal performance of power outage, whatever, just annoying. Someone yelled that Harwick's infrastructure was a joke. Someone else called their parents. Quill had already built a small radio receiver from components he kept in a project box under his bed. He'd brought it with him on the supply run, tuned now to the emergency broadcast frequency. Through the static, barely audible, citizens are encouraged to remain calm and cooperate with relevant authorities. This is a precautionary measure. Please await further instruction. Precautionary measure, Beckett said flatly. That's what they always say right before it's not precautionary, Quill confirmed. I moved to the window slit. Below, in the quad, I could see clusters of students with their phones out, the screens bright in the grey morning. One girl was on a call, and even from 4 floors up, I could see the exact moment her expression shifted from confused to something else. Then the first scream came. It was distant, from the direction of the residential halls on the far side of campus, maybe a quarter mile away. High, sharp, and cut off too fast. We all heard it. Nobody spoke. Then the second scream, closer,
followed by the sound of glass breaking. And then a sound I'd heard in 100 games and hoped never to hear in real life. That low, wet, rhythmic grunting. The sound of something that had been human recently and wasn't anymore. Beckett said very quietly, "Positions." Part 3. Quill. From the roof of Academic Hall, we could see the residential complex. Building 5's windows were lit up, which was wrong. The power was out. But the windows were lit from inside by the stuttering glow of fire. Figures moved in the glass. Some of them moved in ways that were wrong, bending at angles that didn't accommodate a healthy spine. On the 3rd floor, something pulled a person backward through a window frame, and the window went dark. I had never felt my body do what it did in that moment. A full system reboot where everything just stops for a second while your brain tells you that was real and you can't unsee it. Beckett grabbed my arm and hauled me back from the parapet. "They moved towards sound," he said, "so we stopped making it. Go back inside." We went back inside. We barricaded. We checked our supplies. We ate half a protein bar each because Beckett said we needed the calories, and nobody argued with him. For 2 hours we monitored. Then Quill noticed that his radio had gone silent, and we checked his walkie-talkie, and I said, "Where's Quill?" And the room got very quiet. He'd left a note. Of course he had. Quill was the kind of person who left notes. Went to Morrison Lab to calibrate the signal interceptor. Back by 0600. It was now 0840. Morrison Science Building, 200 meters from Academic Hall. Currently invisible through the smoke drifting across the quad. "I'll go," I said. "No," said Beckett. "Someone has to." "Not—" He stopped. Ran the calculation in his head the way he always did, fast and silent. 15 minutes, in and out. You go alone because alone is mobile. Take the pepper spray and the Swiss Army knife. Don't use the elevator, it makes noise. In survival games, Zeph said, then seemed to realize how that sounded, then decided to finish the sentence anyway because it was accurate. The guy who goes alone never comes back. "I'll be back," I said. That's what they all say. I suited up in what we had. Thick hoodie, sweatpants tucked into thick socks, cycling helmet strapped tight, knee pads from the gym. I must have looked absolutely ridiculous. I felt absolutely ridiculous. I strapped the Swiss Army knife to my belt, pocketed the pepper spray,
picked up the garden shovel because it was better than nothing, and opened the observatory door. The hallway outside smelled wrong. Not obviously, not the smell of rot you'd expect from the movies. Something subtler, like a hospital smell crossed with something organic and unwelcome. The way a gas leak smells like nothing, and yet somehow gets your attention anyway. I went down the stairs one at a time. Every step felt like a decision. The campus outside, glimpsed through window glass, was unrecognizable. The quad where students had been standing 2 hours ago was empty, except for moving shapes that traveled in the wrong way. Some of them had been wearing pajamas. Some of them still were. They stumbled and lurched between the dormitory buildings, and if I watched them too long, I started to see things I didn't want to see. Evidence of what they'd been doing since the power went out. I stopped watching and moved. Morrison Science Hall's front entrance had a cluster of infected outside it. 4, 5, maybe 6, milling without purpose, but covering the door. I went around to the east wing, a maintenance corridor, a window on the ground floor that I'd noticed during our earlier supply run, the one with the broken latch that never quite held. The window opened with a push. I was inside. The hallway smelled more strongly here. Disinfectant and formaldehyde, and something underneath it that made my jaw clench.
Emergency lighting in pale green lines along the floor. I moved through the shadows, shovel in both hands, every footstep placed deliberately. 2nd floor. 3rd. The chemistry lab was dark and undisturbed. The biology lab next door was not. The door was open. There were stains on the linoleum that led toward the interior, dark and tacky, and arranged in a pattern that made my throat close. I followed them with my eyes, not my feet, and traced them to the supply closet at the far end. "Quill," I said, barely above a breath. "Quill, it's Dash." A pause that lasted long enough that my heart relocated to my throat. Then, "In here. Get in, quick." He was in the back corner of the supply closet, knees drawn up, face the color of old newspaper. His left arm was wrapped in a rough bandage made from a torn lab coat sleeve. He was clutching a tangle of wires and circuit boards to his chest with his good arm. "I'm okay," he said immediately, which was both the most important thing anyone had ever said to me and clearly not entirely true. "What happened?" "Professor Rowe." His voice was steady, but the steadiness was the careful, deliberate kind you deploy when you're managing something bad. "He was here last night when I came to work on the interceptor. He seemed fine, and then he wasn't. His eyes went." He paused. "White. All white. He moved very fast for someone who shouldn't be able to move very fast." I looked at the bandage. "Bite?" "Scratch. He got my arm with his fingers when I shoved him into a cabinet. I don't know what that means for transmission." He adjusted his glasses with his good hand. "The interceptor works, by the way. I finished it. I can pull military band frequencies and unencrypted local emergency channels." "That's amazing. That's unbelievably cool. We need to leave right now." "Yes, obviously." I helped him up. He was steady once he found his feet. His arm clearly hurt, but he wasn't going to tell me how much.
Then we both heard it, in the hallway. A slow sound. A scraping, dragging kind of movement accompanied by a sound from a human throat that should not have been coming from a human throat. Through the crack of the supply closet door, I watched a figure enter the lab. Dr. Cassius Rowe, 42 years old, award-winning organic chemistry professor, winner of last year's Faculty Excellence Award. He was wearing his lab coat, which was saturated. His hair looked like he'd been through a wind tunnel. He moved through the lab in the manner of someone receiving directions from a part of the body that wasn't the brain. Slow, purposeful, wrong. His head tilted, nostrils working. He smelled us. I was almost certain of it. "Shelf to your left," Quill whispered, barely sound at all. "Second row, sulfuric acid, diluted, but still." I reached the shelf without breathing, found the bottle, felt the familiar weight of doing something that couldn't be undone. The closet door opened. I threw the bottle. The sound was a hiss and a sizzle and a howl, a sound I'll hear for the rest of my life in certain kinds of nightmares. And Dr. Rowe lurched backward, hands going to his face, still moving but disoriented. I grabbed Quill's good arm and we went through the door in a controlled sprint, through the lab, into the hallway. Behind us, still coming. Slower now, but coming. I took the stairs 2 at a time, Quill keeping pace, his arm tucked against his chest. Ground floor. Window. I laced my fingers into a foothold, boosted him through, went through myself in an undignified scramble. Outside. Fresh air. The sounds of a campus in the process of becoming something terrible. Across the quad, 50 meters out, Zeph, standing in the shadow of Academic Hall's side entrance with a glass bottle in each hand, a rag stuffed in the neck of each one. "Been working on these," he said as we ran toward him.
"Figured you might need some help." He lit the first one with a lighter he'd palmed from our supply stash and threw it in a clean arc. It hit the ground 10 meters to our left and bloomed into a curtain of fire, and 3 infected shapes that had been converging on us from the right stumbled back from the heat with a flinching instinct that looked almost animal. "They don't like fire," I said. "Nobody likes fire," Zeph said. "That's not a zombie thing. That's just universal." We ran. 200 meters, the door, the stairs, the observatory. Beckett closed and barricaded the door behind us before any of us had our breath back. And when I bent double over my knees and finally started breathing again, I thought, so that's what all those hours of gaming were for. All those hours of making decisions under pressure and managing panic and thinking 2 steps ahead. Not for anything fun. For this. Part 4. The Hold. On the 3rd day, we had a system. 2 people on watch at all times, 1 at the window slit, 1 monitoring the radio. 2 people resting. Food rationed to 2 portions per person per day. Protein first, calories counted. Water tracked carefully. Noise minimized absolutely. We'd learned on day 2 that sound was the primary trigger. Someone in the dormitory across the quad had called for help at the top of their lungs, and 17 infected had converged on that building within 4 minutes. The building went quiet shortly after. We didn't talk about what that meant. What we did talk about, in whispers, in the long hours between watches, was the strange, compressed intimacy of the situation. 4 guys who'd known each other for 18 months and thought they knew each other pretty well, now sharing 400 square feet and the weight of knowing that everything they'd considered permanent was currently failing. In a literal and figurative sense, in several cases. Zeph, it turned out, had been carrying significant anxiety about his GPA for 2 semesters without mentioning it to anyone. He brought this up on his second night watch in a murmur while we monitored the infected movement below. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because the world is ending and personal context stops mattering." He paused. "Also, you're the only one awake." "Fair. Do you think professors will be flexible about incompletes given the literal zombie outbreak?" "I think they'll probably be understanding, yeah." He let out a slow breath. "Good. That's actually a relief." He paused. "I've been more stressed about that stats class than about this, and I think that says something unflattering about my psychology." There were other conversations in those long hours. Quill talked, genuinely, at length, for the first time any of us had heard,
about his family. His parents, both engineers, quietly baffled by his path into signal systems and hardware. His younger sister, also at Harwick, in the engineering dorm on the far side of campus. He'd texted her before the signal cut out. She'd said she was barricaded on the 4th floor with her RA. After that, we noticed he checked the walkie-talkie frequencies with a slightly different quality of attention, not just scanning for information, but listening for something specific. He never said it directly. He didn't have to. Beckett was the quietest, as always in the downtime. He was a person who rested as deliberately as he acted. But sometimes, on his watch shifts, I'd see him looking at the city below with an expression that was hard to read. Not fear or despair, but something more like a chess player staring at a board that had been set up wrong, working out if there was still a legal move. There was always a move. That was the thing about Beckett, until there wasn't. Quill's arm improved. The scratch hadn't gone deep, and after cleaning and regular betadine application, the wound started to look more like something a person could survive. He put all his energy into the interceptor, and on the morning of the 3rd day, it started delivering information. Fragments of emergency broadcasts, military band communications, clipped and coded and hard to interpret, but unmistakably urgent. Sector East has been compromised. Request reinforcement. Infected count exceeds projections significantly. Activate Protocol 7. From local police. All units, we are code black in districts 3 through 9. Harwick City Emergency Management is static. Evacuation points are more static. The city was falling. Not just the campus, the city. Our campus was an island in something much larger. Then, on the afternoon of the 4th day, Quill found something different in the interceptor noise. A partially encrypted transmission that he couldn't fully decode, but pieces of it were clear. Preliminary serum trials, promising results. Location secure at Harwick CDC. Coordinates follow. We stared at each other across the observation room. The Harwick Center for Disease Control was a city facility on the north end of town. We'd driven past it 100 times and never thought about it. It was 15 kilometers from the campus, through streets that were currently occupied by things we'd rather not encounter. Promising results, Quill said. Preliminary, Beckett said. Still. Beckett looked at the window. Outside, somewhere in the dark, the infected kept making their sounds. We survived first. We can think about this after. We survived. We rationed. We watched. We waited for a plan to present itself, or for help to arrive, or for something to change. On the morning of day 5, something changed. Part 5. Beckett. I woke from my guard shift and found Beckett in the corner. He was sitting with his back against the wall and his knees drawn up and his eyes open.
But the eyes were wrong. Unfocused in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He was shaking. Not dramatically, but continuously. The way a table shakes when a truck passes outside. A vibration you can see in the surface tension of a glass of water. "Beck," I said. "Hey, Beckett." He looked at me. Took a moment to find me, like he was looking through something. "Hey, don't..." He stopped. "I don't feel right." My stomach went cold. "Since when?" "Yesterday, maybe before that." I checked him as carefully as I knew how to. No bite marks, no scratches from an infected. His skin was hot under my hand, the specific hot of a fever, not exertion. And at the back of his right calf, half hidden by his sock line, a swollen red welt about the size of a quarter. It looked exactly like a mosquito bite. Zeph, when he saw it, sat down on a sleeping mat and didn't say anything for a long time. The roof. 3 days ago, Beckett had done a security check on the roof of Academic Hall, checking sight lines, looking for secondary egress options. The roof was overgrown. Years of unmaintained drainage turned into a little ecosystem of standing water and scrubby weeds. The kind of place that would breed mosquitoes.
Quill said what we were all thinking. The vector isn't only contact. Insects can carry it. We all looked at the roof access hatch. We all thought about 3 nights of rooftop guard duty. We all looked at our own arms, checking for things we hadn't thought to check for. Beckett said, "I need you to put me in the storage room." "No," Zeph said immediately. "It's the only—" "No!" Beckett stood up. He was steadier on his feet than he should have been, the kind of steadiness that comes from deciding that you're not allowed to fall apart. "I can feel it. It's in me already. It's moving." He looked at each of us in turn. I locked the door from the inside in Outbreak protocol every single time. I know this scenario.
The quarantine room is the only option that gives everyone else a chance. "This isn't a game," Zeph said. "No, it's not." He picked up his jacket, folded it neatly, set it on the shelf. "Which is why I'm asking, instead of waiting until I can't ask anymore." The storage room door had a lock on both sides. Beckett went in. He set his water bottle inside, his food portion, his phone, although it had been dead for 2 days. He turned around in the doorway and looked at us, all 3 of us, for a moment that I can't describe with any justice. "Chain the handle," he said. "Everything you can find." He pulled the door closed. We heard the interior lock engage. I sat on the floor next to the door. Zeph was very still. Quill had his glasses off, cleaning them with the edge of his sleeve, which he did when he was trying to hold something together. For the next 12 hours, the sounds from inside changed gradually. Not all at once, not cinematically, but in increments that were somehow worse for being subtle. Beckett didn't scream. He'd known he wouldn't, I think. He'd decided he wouldn't. But the silences between sounds grew longer, and the sounds themselves grew less like something a person makes. Zeph sat with his hand on the chained door handle for most of those 12 hours. Around the 9th hour, from inside, barely audible, Beckett's voice, his actual voice, clear and deliberate. "Serum." A pause. "Get the serum." Another pause. "That's an order." We looked at each other. 15 kilometers. Through a dead city. To a building that might or might not have a treatment, that might or might not work. Based on a partially decoded radio transmission from people who might or might not still be alive. The math was awful. We started packing. Part 6. The Dead City. We left at 400 the next morning, the darkest part, the hour where even the infected seemed to slow down, as if whatever ran them needed sleep the way regular bodies did.
We sealed every gap in our clothing with athletic tape, wrists, collar, ankles. Quill tuned a pair of campus security walkie-talkies to a frequency that was still operational. I carried the shovel. Zeph carried one of the remaining Molotov cocktails. Quill carried the interceptor and his own weight, which, given his arm, was more than I wanted him to carry. But he was not a person you argued with about carrying his own weight. We moved through campus in single file, hugging the walls, every step placed and deliberate. Quill navigated by phone. He'd downloaded offline maps before the signal died, routing us past the south gate, through the maintenance corridors between buildings, to the emergency service door in the perimeter wall that Beckett had identified during his first week in the observatory. The lock took Quill 4 minutes to pick. He'd watched 3 lock-picking tutorial videos before the internet went down, on the grounds that it seemed like a useful skill, and in the specific limited way that everything Quill did was useful, it was. The door opened. We stepped outside. The city was not a city anymore. Not in any sense that had ever meant anything to me. I had expected a battlefield, debris, bodies, the recognizable aftermath of disaster. What I hadn't expected was the quietness. Cars sat at odd angles in the street, doors hanging open, a few still running, their headlights dimming. The traffic lights were all dark. Windows on every visible block were black or broken. Sometime in the past 5 days, someone had started a fire in a parking garage 3 blocks south, and it had burned itself down to a sustained red glow like a coal bed. The smoke drifted. The infected were everywhere, but they were slow in the dark, and they moved mostly by sound. We'd been quiet for 5 days. We were very practiced at being quiet. We moved block by block, 2 kilometers the first night before the sky began to lighten.
Then we found a 3-story office building with a solid exterior door and locked ourselves into an empty suite on the 2nd floor to wait out the daylight. From the windows, with the astronomy club's binoculars that I'd grabbed at the last second, we watched the city. The infected were more active during the day, not faster, but more alert. It was the light, we thought, or the visibility. They congregated in ways that seemed almost purposeful, drifting into loose clusters and then dispersing again. One, still in a business suit, kept standing at an intersection as if waiting for a bus. The bus shelter sign had fallen, but he stood in the right spot, with the patient vacancy of someone who was on time and wasn't worried. There. Quill was at the other window, binoculars up, 2 blocks east. A group of 6 people, moving in organized formation, checking doorways, communicating, covering each other's angles. Military-style movement, but their equipment was mismatched, civilian, improvised. Another survivor group. Not official, Quill said. Look at the gear. Hardware store supplies, sports equipment. That's self-organized. Should we try to contact them? Zeph asked. Beckett would have said, not yet. Let's see who they are first. In the absence of Beckett, I said, let's see who they are first. It was around noon when the walkie-talkie crackled. Anyone out there? Respond if you can read me. Anyone? The voice was a woman's, controlled but with an edge of something underneath it. I looked at Quill. He shook his head slightly, revealing our position was a risk. But the voice came again, same frequency, same message. And something in the flat, professional cadence of it made me press the transmit button. Read you. We're a group of 3. Who is this? A pause. Marlowe Dunn, 2nd-year med student. I've been in the Harwick Medical Sciences building for 4 days. How many are you? Solo. A breath. I need to tell you something.
Are you trying to get anywhere in particular? I'm picking up CDC activity on the scanner I rigged. The serum trials, Quill said immediately, leaning toward the radio. You know about those? Not a question. I know a way in. Secondary access through the adjacent parking structure. But I can't make it alone. If you're anywhere on the north side of campus. We're on Wicker Street, I said. 1 block east of the old Anderson building. I know exactly where that is. Don't move until I get there. And for God's sake, don't draw attention. Copy that, I said. Marlowe, how do you know how to rig a scanner? A pause that sounded almost like an exhausted laugh. My dad's a ham radio operator. I grew up listening to frequencies. Some people spend their childhoods differently. I turned the radio off to conserve battery. Zeph was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. We're going to be okay, he said. Not hopefully. More like someone stating the terms of a deal they've decided to commit to. Probably not, I said. Yeah, well, probably not is better than definitely not. It really is, I said. We waited. Part 7. Doyle Mack. She arrived at dusk, which told me she was smart. Dusk was the transitional hour, dim enough to obscure movement, but not dark enough for the infected to be at full activity. She came in through the back of the building via a loading dock, knocked in the pattern I'd told her, 3, 2, 1. And when I opened the door, I found a woman in scrubs with a first aid kit backpack and a fire extinguisher clenched in both hands, like she intended to use it on someone. "Marlowe Dunn," she said. "Dashiell Craw," I said. "This is Zeph Calloway and Quillen Vesper." She assessed the three of us in about 2 seconds, the way medical people do. Quick and thorough and professional. Her eyes stopped on Quill's arm. "That needs proper cleaning. I have actual supplies." She shouldered past me into the room and started setting up without being asked. She was efficient, and she didn't flinch at Quill's arm, which was saying something because his arm had been through a lot in the past 48 hours. While she worked, she explained the route. Through the abandoned mall, 2 blocks west, into the parking garage that connected to the CDC building, up to the 3rd floor, where a pedestrian skybridge led to the CDC's secondary entrance. She'd mapped it during 4 days alone, moving at night in short reconnaissance runs, never going farther than she could get back from safely. "How many people in the CDC building?" Quill asked. 3, last contact. Actual staff. They've been maintaining the serum cold chain without reliable power. She tied off the bandage with 2 clean movements. "The preliminary results were real. I talked to one of them on the radio 2 days ago. The serum works in animal models, but they're running low on power and the building's compromised below the 2nd floor, and they can't hold indefinitely." "We have a friend," I said. "Back at campus, quarantine, about 30 hours in." She looked at me for a moment, the look of someone doing a calculation they don't entirely like the result of. "Then we move tonight, not tomorrow." "Agreed. I need everyone to understand the route before we leave. No improvising, no splitting up, no heroics. The mall is navigable if we go through the east entrance and stay left of the food court. The infected cluster near the Cinnabon, for some reason I genuinely refuse to think too hard about. The parking garage is 3 blocks north from the mall exit. 3rd level has the skybridge access. If anything goes wrong in the garage, we do not go up. We go back south and reassemble at the fire station on Wicker. Does everyone understand?" "Yes," said Quill and I at the same time. "I have thoughts about the Cinnabon thing," Zeph said. "That actually makes total biological sense if you—" "Tonight," said Marlowe. We moved at dusk. Marlowe's route was as good as promised. She moved like someone who'd spent 4 days alone in a dead city. Which is to say, she moved like someone who had been forced to become very good at this very quickly. We crossed 3 blocks without incident, pressed to walls and moving in the shadow of parked cars, the way you learn to move when sound is everything. The mall was dark and strange. Shopping malls are designed to be lit from within, to generate their own cheerful artificial daylight. And without power, they became something genuinely unsettling. A cathedral of consumer ambition gone totally dark. The shapes of closed storefronts visible only in the faint gray light coming through the skylights. Our footsteps were careful on the tile floors. Quill's sneakers, slightly too large for him, gave a faint squeak every 4th step that had us all holding our breath. The food court was on the right side. We went left. The infected there moved slowly in the darkness, 5 or 6 of them drifting between tables in what looked almost like a social configuration if you didn't look too closely. We gave them a wide berth. Marlowe had been right. Whatever olfactory memory or residual instinct kept them anchored to that spot, it seemed to want their attention inward, not outward. We made it through the mall, out the north exit. 3 blocks, open road, moving fast. The parking garage entrance was on the ground floor of a building that had once been a mid-range hotel. The lobby was empty, windows intact, front desk still stocked with the laminated rate cards and the little bowls of mints that hotels kept as a gesture towards civilization. We went through the lobby and into the attached garage and started up the ramp. We made it to the 2nd level,
before we heard them. Then we ran into Doyle Mack. He was at the garage's third-level entrance, a big man with a beard that had gone wild over the past week, wearing a construction vest over a football jersey.
He had a fire department axe hooked on his belt, and he was flanked by two others, one with a wooden bat, one with something that might have been a tire iron.
"Well, hey," he said. He had the voice of a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and the past week hadn't changed that estimation of himself. "Look at the little crew." His eyes moved over the four of us with the practiced look of someone who'd been doing this long enough to have gotten comfortable at it. Zeph's bag, Marlowe's kit, my shovel, Quill's backpack with the interceptor. "We're passing through," I said. "Not looking for trouble." "Nobody ever is." He smiled, which was the least comforting smile I'd ever seen. "But hey, times being what they are, it'd be real helpful if you set those bags down and kept moving without them. Call it a toll." "We can't do that." "Sure you can. Watch." He reached out and picked up a loose concrete chip from the floor, tossed it up, caught it. The two men behind him shifted weight. The one with the bat held it a little differently. "You just set them down. Simple as that. Nobody has to have a bad night." "We already had a bad night," Zeph said. "We've been having bad nights for a week. We're basically experts in bad nights at this point." Doyle looked at him. It was the look of a man who found this amusing in the way that dangerous things sometimes find small things amusing. "The bags," Doyle said. There was the moment, that specific quality of a moment right before something irreversible starts. The held breath, the weight shift. I'd played enough high-pressure games to know that hesitation in this moment was the thing that would get us killed. And I also knew that Doyle had numbers, and a fire axe, and at least one more guy somewhere out of sight, because that was the kind of operation he was running. "Zeph," I said, "drop yours." Zeph, who was directly behind me, dropped his bag. He dropped it onto Doyle's left foot with the full weight of 40 pounds of water, food, and equipment, and the sound it made was the sound of someone's good mood ending very abruptly. Doyle made a noise. His two companions both looked at him, because when the boss makes that noise, you look at the boss. And while they were looking at the boss, we were already moving. We went right, hard, through a row of parked cars, between an F-150 and a minivan, and kept going. I heard Doyle behind us, a stream of language that would have been impressive under different circumstances, and then the sound of heavy feet on concrete. "Left," Marlowe said, cutting between a support pillar and a compact sedan, and we followed her because she'd been in this garage before and we hadn't. Down the ramp to the second level, another ramp. The ground floor, out through a fire exit that banged behind us like a gunshot. We ran. 2 blocks south, 1 block east, into the recessed doorway of a hardware store that had been cleaned out down to the bare shelves, but still had a door that locked. We pressed back in the shadow, breathing, listening. Nothing followed us that far. "Okay," said Zeph after about 30 seconds. "So we lost my bag." "We have to go back through," I said. "We can't go back through the same way," Marlowe said. She wasn't winded, which I found both impressive and slightly annoying. "Doyle will have the ramp covered now, but the garage has a stairwell on the east face. Exterior, fire escape style. If we can access it from the street level—" "How?" Quill asked. She looked at him. "Do you have the signal interceptor?" "Always." "Can you generate a directional sound pulse? Any frequency that'll carry?" A beat. Quill's eyes went somewhere distant and calculating. "I can generate a 60 hertz tone through the radio hardware if I push the signal amplifier into feedback. It'll be maybe 90 decibels, non-directional, lasts until I cut it." "That's enough," she said. "We send the sound from the north end. They move toward it. We go up the east stairs while they're occupied." "That'll also attract the infected," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "It will." We looked at each other. 90 seconds, she said. That's our window from tone start to the point where we're inside the stairwell. I've done worse on tighter timelines, Zeph said. You really haven't, I said. I have, though. Remember when we had to submit that group project at midnight and Beckett's laptop died at 11:58 and we had... Quill, I said. How long to set it up? 2 minutes. Less. Do it. It took 90 seconds. Quill moved with the focused calm he always had when doing something technical. His fingers sure, despite the bad arm. And when the tone started, it was a low, carrying hum that moved through the concrete of the parking structure like a physical thing. We heard Doyle's voice change. The words went away, and the direction changed, footsteps receding toward the north end. We went up the east stairs. The sky bridge was on 3, intact and empty. We crossed it at a run. The CDC building's second floor was lit by battery-powered lanterns, the kind that last 72 hours on fresh cells, and these were past the 60-hour mark, throwing a warm amber light that somehow made the space feel more intimate and more dire at the same time. 3 people looked up when we came through the door. Dr. Kellerman, a compact man in his 60s, with the steady eyes of someone who'd been managing crises long enough to stop being surprised by them. 2 lab techs, younger, tired in the bone-deep way that goes past physical exhaustion into something else. They'd kept the cold chain. In a building with compromised power, in the middle of a city outbreak, they'd kept the samples viable. Serum for one? Kellerman asked when we'd explained. 1 person, I confirmed. He's been symptomatic for about 32 hours. Progressing. Kellerman looked at his techs.
One of them made a small sound and turned to the equipment case. Animal models showed reversal at up to 60 hours, Kellerman said, which was both encouraging and not. I won't make a promise I can't keep, but if you can get this back to him, we can, Marlowe said, with a certainty that I decided to borrow wholesale. They packed the serum in a portable coolant case, vacuum-sealed, battery-cooled, good for 8 hours. We had Quill's radio. We had our route back. We had 20 minutes of relative quiet in which to form a plan. Then the ground floor fire door blew open. Doyle Mack had found the east stairs. Part 8. The Roof. The infected had followed Doyle's group into the CDC building. That was the arithmetic of it. Doyle was loud, the infected followed sound, and now we had 2 separate problems converging on one building at the same time. We went up. The rooftop was gravel and HVAC equipment and the skeleton of an old antenna installation, brick walls around the perimeter, 1 central water tank. Dr. Kellerman and the lab techs followed us up. Quill was lagging, favoring his arm more than he had been, his face set in the expression of a person declining to acknowledge pain on principle. Chain the door, Quill said the moment we were through. He'd already spotted it, a length of heavy chain coiled around the base of the water tank mount, with a padlock that had rusted open at some point and been left on. 2 loops through the handles. If you can find anything else to brace it with, do it. I found the chain, did the loops, braced it with a loose section of HVAC duct that I ripped free from a corroded bracket. It wasn't elegant. It held. There was a pile of old construction debris along the north parapet, broken bricks, a stack of bent metal framing, a collection of asbestos tiles from whatever renovation had been left unfinished, which was an OSHA violation even in normal times, and was now the most useful thing on this rooftop. I dragged tiles toward the door. Kellerman picked up bricks. Quill directed from the water tank, because his arm had genuinely reached its limit.
More to the left side, he said. They push laterally when they cluster. The weak point is the hinge margin. How do you know that? I'd been watching how they move for 5 days. Observation has to be good for something. Below us, the impacts started. Rhythmic, patient, the specific cadence of something that had no concept of giving up. The door vibrated, but held. The brick stack grew. From the far end of the roof, the fire escape hatch. Doyle Mack came through it like he owned the place, which was the energy he'd apparently decided to commit to fully, all the way to the end, axe in both hands. His remaining companion came up behind him. They stood at the far end of the roof, and Doyle looked at us with the expression of a man who'd had a terrible week and had decided that was everyone else's fault. "We are not doing this again," I said. "You left me in the garage," he said, "with those things. You tried to rob us. Times are hard." We stared at each other across the width of the rooftop. Below the barricaded door, the impacts continued their patient rhythm. From below the fire escape hatch, I could hear more sound coming up, which meant the infected had found the fire stairs and were using them, slowly, wrong-jointed and determined. We had approximately 2 fronts and 1 rooftop, and no good options. Quill cleared his throat. "Mr. Mack." Doyle looked at him. "There's debris along the north wall, bricks, metal framing. The hatch you came through doesn't have a lock on this side, but if we wedge the opening with rebar and stack enough weight on the doors, it'll hold for a while. The same principle applies to the stairs door." He adjusted his glasses with his good hand, the familiar gesture so out of place on this rooftop, in this situation, that it was almost funny.
We're going to be here for an unknown amount of time. We can either spend that time fighting each other, which will make noise and attract more infected, or we can spend it making this position defensible. I'm suggesting the latter. Doyle looked at the hatch. He looked at the stairwell door, which had taken on a particular quality of vibration. He looked at me. "What are you waiting on?" I asked. "Better offer?" He dropped the axe, not dramatically, just set it down next to his foot, the way you put a tool down when you're done with it. "Fine," he said. "Tell me where to stack." We worked. All of us. Doyle's man on the hatch, Marlowe helping Kellerman with the brick stack, Doyle himself picking up metal framing and forcing it through the hatch handles in a makeshift jam, moving with an efficiency that suggested he'd done construction work at some point in his life, before whatever path had led him to this rooftop. The sounds from below diminished as the barricades grew. Nobody talked. There wasn't anything to say. It took about 20 minutes. By the end, we had 2 reasonably fortified positions and 7 people standing in a loose cluster next to the water tank, all of us breathing harder than the exertion required, because some of it wasn't exertion. I put the rebar in both hands. I stood there. I thought, this is where it ends, one way or another. This is the team fight, the real one, the one where you see whether all those hours of practice were actually practice or just entertainment. Then Zeph said quietly, "West." I turned, a shape against the dawn sky, small, dark, moving with the purposefulness of something that had a destination. And then the sound arrived, half a second behind the sight, always. The specific chop of rotors that doesn't sound like anything else in the world. That low, rhythmic percussion that hits in your sternum as much as your ears.
That you cannot mistake for anything else. Once you've heard it in the context it was designed for. "Helicopter," Kellerman said. And there was something in how he said it. Not excitement, not relief. Just the sound of a man who had been holding something very carefully for a very long time, and had just been told he could put it down. The Ohio National Guard helicopter came in low and went into a hover at 50 feet, and the rotor wash hit us like a physical thing, all of us turning our faces away, grit and gravel going horizontal. In the noise of it, the sounds from below the barricades became inaudible. The world contracted to the wind and the thud of rotors and the dark shape of the aircraft overhead. The M240 opened up. It was brief. It was decisive. When it was done, the barricaded doors had stopped moving. Doyle sat down against the parapet. Didn't reach for the axe. Just sat. The rope drop came 90 seconds later. 6 rangers, brisk and efficient, moving with the detached competence of people who were doing their job in circumstances that would break most people's composure, and had apparently decided not to let it break theirs. One came to me directly. "How many in your party?" "7, I said. 3 CDC staff, 3 from the university, 1 from—" I looked at Marlowe. "Medical." "And them?" He indicated Doyle. "They're people," I said. "They're coming." Doyle looked up at me. I didn't look back. Quill went first, because of his arm, then Marlowe and the CDC staff, then Zeph, who paused before grabbing the rope, and turned around and opened his mouth, and then closed it, and just looked at me for a moment, with the full weight of 7 days on his face, undefended and real. He grabbed the rope. He went up. I was last. Before I took the rope, I stood on that rooftop for 30 seconds and let myself look. The barricaded doors, the chain holding, the brick stack we'd built, the bent rebar, Doyle's axe left behind on the gravel. The sun full up now,
burning through the smoke layer, casting long, gold light across the rooftop and the city below, making everything look briefly like something other than what it was. I thought about Beckett. The coolant case was already up. Whatever it contained, whatever promising results meant in the language of scientists being careful, it was going with us. And we were going back. And that was the thing I held on to. I grabbed the rope. I went up. The city spread below me as I rose, block after block of it. Pockets of damage sitting next to pockets of ordinary. A house with its mailbox flag still up, red against the gray. A gas station with its price sign still lit. The university, visible in the distance. Academic hall rising above the tree line with the small dome of the astronomy observatory on top. The tiny room where we'd made our fort and counted our cans and played survival games for real, without a continue screen. The helicopter turned north. Part 9. After. They got us to the forward operating base at Harwick Fairgrounds, which had been turned into an emergency evacuation center, with a speed that suggested the National Guard had been planning this contingency for longer than anyone had publicly admitted. There were tents, generators, medical stations, people in various states of shock and recovery. The FOB had a cold storage unit. The serum stayed cold. We explained. We showed them the coordinates from Quill's interceptor. A medic with actual training looked at the data and at the serum, and then at the CDC staff and had a conversation in low tones that I tried very hard to hear and couldn't. Then they radioed someone. Then someone else came. Then there was a period of approximately 4 hours during which nobody told us anything, which is the military's primary mode of communication with civilians. And then, finally, a second helicopter. Different team. And they went to Harwick University. They brought Beckett back. He was alive.
I want to be clear about that. He was alive when they found him, still in the storage room, which he had apparently reinforced from the inside with every piece of furniture he could reach. The infection had progressed, but not completed. He was, the word the doctor used was transitioning, which was a clinical way of saying something that none of us wanted to think about in clinical terms. The serum worked. Not cleanly, not without what the doctors called a difficult recovery period, but it worked. The preliminary results had been real. By the time the city was declared stable, 27 days after the power went out, Beckett was sleeping in an actual hospital bed. He could hold a conversation. He could eat. He couldn't walk yet, and he spent most of his time sleeping, but he was there. Quill's arm healed. Zeph, in the FOB's first week, organized a supply distribution system for the other survivors that so impressed the emergency management staff that they gave him an official coordinator role. He took it. He was annoyingly good at it. We were together. Epilogue. 1 year later. The library had new windows. They'd replaced the original ones, casualties of the Outbreak's first week, with a slightly different design, and the light came in at a different angle now, which I always noticed but couldn't quite explain to anyone who hadn't been in the building before. It was one of 1,000 small differences that made up the landscape of after. New windows, repaired walls, a dining hall that no longer had the dented back door we'd broken into, but a new steel door with a deadbolt that had been installed at some point in the process of putting everything back. I was sitting at a table in the back with a stack of textbooks. Midterms were in 2 weeks. Real midterms. The kind where the worst outcome was a bad GPA. And my phone buzzed. Group chat. Beckett,
who had his own apartment now because the university had given him and his parents a very earnest apology and a significant amount of financial accommodation. Basketball team just won conference. Section row 7 tonight if anyone's coming. Zeph, I'll be there. You're buying the first round of nachos, Beckett. That's non-negotiable. Beckett, on what grounds? Zeph, on the grounds that you were dead for like 2 weeks and I had feelings about it. Nachos are how I process feelings. This is established. Quill, who was in a master's program now, having parlayed his signal interceptor design into an actual academic paper that 2 separate professors had called unexpectedly significant. Congrats to the team. I have office hours until 7. Save me nachos. Zeph, how are you in office hours? You're a student. Quill, I'm a teaching assistant this semester. It's a long story. Zeph, of course it is. I put my phone down, face up, and looked at the window. The library announcement speaker crackled and a voice said, as it did every year on this date, "Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the Harwick outbreak and subsequent recovery. The university honors those we lost and acknowledges the resilience of everyone who found their way through. In their memory and in their name, keep moving forward." Outside, through the new windows, students crossed the quad on their way to class. Someone was throwing a frisbee. Someone else was lying in the grass with headphones on, which seemed like a completely reasonable thing to be doing on a Wednesday afternoon at a functional university that still existed. My phone buzzed again. My mom. "What do you want for dinner when you come home for break?" I typed back, "Whatever you make is perfect." She sent back a photo. A plate of the short ribs she did on Sundays, the braised all-day kind that took the whole afternoon and made the house smell like something so good it was almost emotional. A meal that assumed there was a house, and a Sunday,
and an afternoon to spend, and someone to eat it with. All the things that had seemed like background noise before. The things you didn't know to be grateful for until they were all that you wanted. I smiled at the photo for longer than was probably warranted. Then I put my phone away, opened my textbook, and started studying for midterms. The apocalypse was over. We were still here. That was the thing about being alive. It kept going. One day, then another, then another. The game never actually ended. It just changed what it was asking of you. And if I'd learned anything from the worst month of my life, it was that you don't always know the ending when you're in the middle. Sometimes you're in the 3 a.m. team fight, absolutely certain this is the final boss, the make or break moment. And it is, and it isn't. Because whatever comes next is also a make or break moment. And the one after that. You just keep playing. One fight at a time. Stock up, now. Orion Falk, last message before going dark. Harwick University School group chat, October 14th.